April 29th, 1902, Volume 4. One who wants everything from God must give all of himself to God. This morning, my adorable Jesus came for a little, telling me, "My daughter, one who wants everything from God must give all of himself to God." And he stopped without telling me anything else for the time being. Seeing him close to me, I said to him, "Lord, have compassion on me. Don't you see how everything is dry and withered? It seems to me that I have become so dry, as if I had never received a drop of rain." And he, "So much the better. Don't you know that the drier the wood, the more easily the fire devours it and converts it into fire? One spark alone is enough to ignite it. But if it is full of humors and not well dried, it takes a big fire to ignite it, and much time to convert it into fire. The same in the soul. When everything is dry, one spark alone is enough to convert her completely into fire of divine love. And I, "Lord, you are making fun of me. How ugly then everything is. And besides, what do you have to burn if everything is dry?" And he, "I am not making fun of you. You yourself cannot comprehend that when not everything is dry in the soul, complacency is a humor, satisfaction is a humor, one's own taste is a humor, self-esteem is a humor. On the other hand, when everything is dry and the soul operates, these humors have no place from which to arise, and the divine fire, finding only the soul naked, as dry as she was created by it, with no other extraneous humors, since it is something that belongs to it, it is extremely easy for it to convert her into its very divine fire. And after this, I infuse in her a garment of peace, and this peace is preserved by interior obedience and kept by external obedience. This peace gives birth to the whole of God within the soul, that is, to all the works, the virtues, and the ways of the humanate word, in such a way that one can see in her his simplicity, his humility, the dependency of his infantile life, the perfection of his adult virtues, the mortification and the crucifixion of his dying. But it always begins from this: one who wants the whole of Christ must give everything to Christ. April 29th, 1904, Volume 6. The divine life manifests itself in creatures through words, through works, and through sufferings. But what manifests it more clearly are the sufferings. Continuing in my usual state, I found myself surrounded by 3 virgins, who took me and wanted to crucify me on a cross by sheer force. But since I did not see blessed Jesus, fearing, I resisted them. On seeing my resistance, they told me, "Dearest sister, do not fear that our spouse is not here. Allow us to begin to crucify you, for the Lord, drawn by the virtue of sufferings, will come. We are coming from heaven, and since we have seen most grave evils about to happen in Europe, we have come to make you suffer, so that at least they might be milder." In the meantime, they pierced my hands and feet through with the nails, but with such cruelty of pain that I felt I was dying. Now, while I was suffering, blessed Jesus came, and looking at me with severe eyes, he told me, Who commanded you to put yourself in these sufferings? Of what use are you to me then? To make me unable even to be free to do what I want and to be a continuous hindrance to my justice? In my interior I said, what does he want from me? Neither did I want this. They have been the ones who induced me, and he gets upset with me. But I could not speak because of the bitterness of the pain. On seeing the severity of our Lord, those virgins made me suffer more, pulling the nails out and then driving them in again. And they brought me closer to him, showing him my sufferings. The more I suffered, the more it seemed that the Lord was appeased. And when they saw him more appeased, and almost moved by my suffering, they left me and went away, leaving me alone with our Lord. Then he himself assisted me and sustained me. And in seeing me suffer, to cheer me, he told me, "My daughter, my life manifests itself in the creatures through words, through works, and through sufferings. But what manifests it more clearly are the sufferings." In the meantime, the confessor came to call me to obedience, but partly because of the sufferings, partly because the Lord would not leave me, I was unable to obey. So I lamented to my Jesus, telling him, "Lord, how come the confessor is here at this hour? Why did he have to come right now?" And he, "My daughter, let him be with us for a while, and also participate in my graces." When one frequents a house continuously, he participates in its crying and in its laughter, in its poverty and in its riches. The same for the confessor. Has he not participated in your mortifications and privations? Now he participates in my presence. And it seemed that he communicated divine fortitude to him, telling him, "The life of God in the soul is hope, and the more you hope, the more divine life you contain within yourself. And since divine life contains power, wisdom, fortitude, love, the soul feels herself as though being watered by as many streams for as many as are the divine virtues, and so the divine life keeps growing within you. But if you do not hope, both in spiritual things and through the spiritual the corporal too will participate, the divine life will be gradually consumed until it is completely extinguished. Therefore hope. Hope always. Then I was just barely able to receive communion, and afterwards I found myself outside of myself, and I saw 3 men in the shape of 3 untamed horses raging throughout Europe, making a great bloody slaughter. It seemed that they wanted to ensnare most of Europe in fierce wars, as though inside a net. All were trembling at the sight of those incarnate devils, and many were destroyed by them. April 29th, 1906, Volume 7. How the soul who is empty of everything is like water that always runs. Continuing in my usual state, Blessed Jesus came for just a little, and filling all of my interior with himself, he told me, "My daughter, an empty soul is like water that runs, and always runs, and when it reaches the center from which it came, only then does it stop. And since water has no color, it receives into itself all the colors that are reflected in it. In the same way, the empty soul runs and always runs toward the divine center from which she came. And when she comes to fill all of herself completely with God, only then does she stop. In fact, since she is empty, Nothing of the divine being escapes her, and since she does not have a color of her own, she receives all the divine colors into herself. Now only an empty soul, because she is empty of everything, comprehends things according to the truth, the preciousness of suffering, the true good of virtue, the necessity for the Eternal One alone, because in order to love something, it is absolutely necessary to hate that which is opposite to what is loved. Only an empty soul reaches such a great happiness. April 29th, 1922, Volume 14. One who lives in the divine will lives from an eternal heartbeat. Finding myself in my usual state, I saw my soul and all of my interior, thoughts, affections, heartbeats, tendencies, changed into as many threads of light, and these extended and expanded so much that coming out from within my interior, they harmonized with the sun, rose higher, touched the heavens, and diffused over the whole earth. While I was watching this, I saw my sweet Jesus, who was holding all those threads of light in his hand, and with enchanting mastery directed them, stretched them, multiplied and enlarged them as much as he wanted. At the touch of that light, all created things lowered themselves, harmonized together, and made feast. Then my sweet Jesus told me, "My daughter, have you seen with what love I amuse myself and direct the acts done in my will? My jealousy is such that I do not entrust them to anyone, not even to the soul herself. I leave not a thought, not a fiber, without enclosing all the power of my will in it. Each one of these acts contains a divine life. Therefore, at the touch of these acts, all created things feel the life of their Creator. They feel once again the strength of that omnipotent Fiat from which they came to existence, and they make feast. Therefore, these acts are new glory and new feast for them. Now, as for this beautiful harmony, these threads of light that come out from your interior, if your heart did not flow in my will but in yours, or in another will, many heartbeats of divine life would be missing in your heart, while many human heartbeats would take them over for as many as those which are missing to the divine, and so with the fibers, affections. And since what is human is not capable of forming light but darkness, many threads of darkness would be formed, and my volition would remain saddened, unable to carry out all the power of my will within you." While he was saying this, I wanted to see whether there were these human heartbeats in my soul which would interrupt the life of the divine heartbeat, and as much as I looked, I could not find any. And Jesus, "For now there is nothing. I have told you this to make you be attentive, and to let you know what it means to live in my will, to live from an eternal and divine heartbeat, to live with my omnipotent breath." April 29th, 1928, Volume 24. How the virtues are seeds, plants, flowers, and fruits, while the divine will is life. The marvels of the I love you. How love is never tired. One who lives in the divine will cannot go to purgatory. The universe would rebel. My poor mind is always prey to the supreme Fiat. It seems to me that I can think of nothing else, nor do I want to occupy myself with anything else. I feel a current in me that stops me now at one point, now at another point of the divine will, but I always end up in it, without ever taking all of its endless light, because I am incapable of it. And my lovable Jesus, moving in my interior, making me a surprise, told me, "My daughter, when the soul practices a virtue, the first act she practices forms the seed, and as she practices the second, the third act, and so forth, she cultivates the seed, she waters it, and it grows into a plant and produces its fruits. If then she practices it only once or a few times, the seed is neither watered nor cultivated. It dies, and the soul remains without plant and without fruit, because it is never one act alone that forms a virtue, but repeated acts. It happens as to the earth. It is not enough to sow the seed in its womb, but one must cultivate it often, water it, if one wants the plant and the fruits of that seed. Otherwise the earth becomes hard over that seed and buries it without giving it life. Now, one who wants the virtue of patience, of obedience, and the like, must sow the first seed, and then water it and cultivate it with other acts. In this way she will form many beautiful and varied plants within her soul. On the other hand, my will is not seed like the virtues, but life. And as the soul begins to be resigned, to look at my will in everything and to live in it, the little divine life is formed in her. And as she advances in the practice of living in my will, this divine life grows and keeps expanding to the point of filling the soul with all of this life, in such a way that nothing is left of her, but a veil that covers it and hides it within itself. And just as with virtues, so with my will. If the creature does not give the continuous nourishment of her acts to the divine life within herself, this life does not grow, and does not fill her entirely. It happens as to a newborn baby who dies at birth if he is not nourished. In fact, since my will is life more than the virtues that are images of the plants, it needs continuous nourishment in order to grow and to become a whole life, as much as a creature is capable of. Here is, then, the necessity for you to always live in it, that you may take its delicious food from my will itself, so as to nourish its divine life in you. See, then, what great difference exists between the virtues and my will. The first are plants, flowers, and fruits that embellish the earth and delight the creatures, while my fiat is heaven, sun, air, heat, heartbeat, all things that form life and divine life in the creature. Therefore love this life and give it continuous nourishment, that it may fill you completely and nothing may be left of you. After this I was continuing my round in the divine volition and repeating the refrain of the I love you. I was saying, Jesus, my love, I want to leave all of my being in your fiat, so that I may find myself in all created things, to pearl them with my I love you. Even more, I want to place my heart in the center of the earth, and as I palpitate, I want to embrace all of its inhabitants, and following all of their heartbeats with my I love you, I want to give you the love of each one of them. And as my heartbeat is repeated from within the center of the earth, I want to place my I love you in all the seeds that the earth encloses in its womb. And as the seeds sprout and plants, herbs, and flowers are formed, I want to place in them my I love you, that I may see them enclosed in my I love you for Jesus. But as I was saying this, my thought interrupted my refrain of the I love you, telling me, how much nonsense you are speaking. Jesus himself must be tired of hearing your long sing-song, I love you, I love you. And Jesus moving so very hurriedly in my interior, and looking at all creation to see whether in all things, small and big, there was the life of my I love you, told me, "My daughter, what marvel, what enchantment, to see all things pearled with your I love you. If all creatures could see all the plants, the atoms of the earth, the stones, the drops of water, pearled with your I love you, and the light of the sun, the air that they breathe, the sky that they see, filled with your I love you, and the stars shining with your I love you, what marvel would not arise in them? What sweet enchantment would not draw the pupils of their eyes to look at your refrain and the long sing-song of your I love you? They would say, how is it possible that she let nothing escape her? We ourselves feel pearled with her I love you. And they would wander around checking and investigating everything to see whether, in fact, nothing had escaped you, so as to enjoy the enchantment of your I love you. Now, if this marvelous enchantment remains unobserved by the terrestrial creatures, it does not remain unobserved in heaven, and the inhabitants up there enjoy the enchantment and the marvels of seeing the whole creation filled and pearled with your I love you. They feel their I love you harmonize with yours. They do not feel separated from the earth, because love unites them together and forms the same notes and the same harmonies. And then you must know that when all things, small and big, were created, I never tired of pearling them with my repeated and incessant I love yous for you. And just as I did not tire of placing them, so I do not tire of hearing them being repeated by you. On the contrary, I enjoy that my I love you does not remain isolated, but has the company of yours. And as yours echoes in mine, they fuse together and live common life. And besides, love is never tired. Rather, it is bearer of joy and happiness for me. Then I don't know how, a thought came to me. If I died and went to purgatory, what will I do? If while being here imprisoned in my body, caged more than in a narrow prison, my poor soul feels it so much when Jesus deprives me of his adorable presence that I don't know what I would do and suffer to find him again. What would happen if, when the prison of my body is broken, and my soul, free and loose, takes its rapid flight, I did not find my Jesus, the center in which I must take refuge, never to go out again? And instead of finding my life, the center of my rest, I found myself flung into purgatory. What would be my pain and my torment? Now, while I was feeling oppressed by these thoughts, my beloved Jesus clasped me all to himself and added, "My daughter, why do you want to oppress yourself? Don't you know that one who lives in my will has the bond of union with the heavens, with the sun, with the sea, with the wind, with all creation? Her acts are fused in all created things, because my will has placed them all in common as its own things, in such a way that all of creation feels the life of this creature. And if she could go to purgatory, they would all feel offended. The entire universe would rebel, and they would not let her go alone to purgatory. The heavens, the sun, the wind, the sea, all would follow her, moving from their places, and, offended, they would say to their Creator, 'She is yours and ours. The life that animates all of us animates her. How is this in purgatory?' The heavens would claim her with their love. The sun would speak up with its light, the wind with its lamenting voices, the sea with its tumultuous waves, All would have a word to defend she who has lived common life with them. But since one who lives in my will absolutely cannot go to purgatory, the universe will remain in its place, and my will have the triumph of bringing to heaven the one who has lived in it on this earth of exile. Therefore, continue to live in my will, and do not want to make your mind gloomy and to oppress yourself with things that do not belong to you. April 29th, 1933, Volume 32. One who does the human volition takes earth, and one who does the divine takes heaven. How Jesus knows how to do all the arts. Enjoyment that he takes in the labor. How the creature is the noble princess who descends from the heights of heaven. My abandonment in the divine fiat continues. I feel that it is an extreme necessity for me to live in it, and if I did not do this, I would feel myself lacking the earth under my feet, the sky over my head, the air to breathe, the sun that illuminates and warms me, the food that nourishes me. Therefore, how could I live? And if I lived, what unhappy life would be mine? My God, free me from living one single instant outside of your will. But while I thought this, my always lovable Jesus, making me his brief little visit, told me, "My daughter, to live outside of my divine will is to live without the connection to the divine life, separated from heaven, as if one had no friendship, knowledge, or relationship with his celestial Father. One can say that while he knows that he has his Father, yet he does not know him. He lives as far away, and therefore he does not participate in his divine goods. Even more, because every act of human will that he does, he always takes earth, and this he knows and loves. And he participates in the unhappiness that the earthly produces, because he goes acquiring with his human acts, such that the human will, without the connection with the divine, knows how to produce much earth that sows passions, thorns, sins, and collects miseries, sadnesses that embitter life. So every act of the human will does nothing other than take a little bit of earth. On the other hand, every act that one does of my will, the creature loses the human terrain and acquires the terrain of heaven. Therefore, every act that she goes doing of divine volition, she takes heaven and goes enlarging her celestial properties. And I myself administer to her the seed, and acting as celestial farmer, I sow together with her the most beautiful virtues, and I form there my sojourn, my refuge, my delights. And I find no difference either remaining in heaven together with the saints in the celestial regions, or remaining in the heaven of this creature. Rather, I experience more pleasure in remaining in the heaven of the human will on earth, for the reason that in it I have something to labor in order to be able to increase this heaven even more. Therefore I can make new acquisitions, receive new love. And although the labor is sacrifice, yet it has the virtue of producing new inventions, new beauties, new arts. It is the labor from which the most astonishing things arise, the most high and profound sciences. And I, who understand all the arts, all the sciences, I work in this heaven, and I form there the most beautiful works, the most artistic and new inventions, and I communicate the highest and most profound sciences, such that now I act as teacher, and I teach the most sublime sciences. Now craftsman, and I form living statues in this heaven. Now I act as farmer, and my creative hands transform the little terrain of the creature into heaven. I experience so much pleasure to use all the arts and amuse myself that now I make one work, and now another one. And now I invent new things, and the novelties always bring more pleasure, more enjoyment, more glory. And these terrestrial heavens will also serve as new surprise and contentment for the whole celestial court, where my divine will reigns as life in the creature. I can do everything. In my hands she becomes prime material in order to develop my divine labors, and to be able to labor is for me the most welcome thing. It is the sweetest rest. It seems that labor and rest alternate with each other. Now in heaven, in my celestial fatherland, there are no labors, neither on my part nor on the part of creatures. One who enters into these celestial regions puts down her burden and says to herself, "My labor is finished. What I have done is done, nor can I add even one comma more to my labor, to my sanctity." And I cannot make new conquests in their souls, because death says confirmation, nor can they take one step more. Therefore there are no labors in the celestial fatherland, but everything is triumph and glory. I can say that all the display that I do of giving new joys, new happiness, and continuous beatitudes, such that I keep all heaven enraptured, is all on my part, because it is not given to me to acquire anything more on their part. This is why they please me even more, because the conquests, the labors, the enjoyments that I find in these terrestrial heavens of the human volition cannot be where all is triumph and glory, not even in the regions of my divine fatherland. Therefore be attentive and never go out of my will, and I promise you to never stop my divine labors in your soul. So I continued to think about the great good that the divine will brings to the creature, and my sovereign Jesus added, "My blessed daughter, you must know that so much is our love and ardent desire to have the creature together with us, that no sooner is she created than we assign her the royal place in our divine will, such that each creature has her place of honor in our divine royal palace. Therefore her beginning, her first act of life, as much in eternity as in time, is in our Fiat. She was not yet in the world, and we loved her. And cherishing her, not only did we give her the place, but we placed our love, our sanctity, our power, light and beauty as her cortege. She is the noble princess who descends from the heights of the heavens in order to pass through the exile. But our volition does not leave her. It descends together with her. It presses itself around her. It passes through the exile together with her. In every act that she does, pain or joy or encounter, it places its prime divine act there so that she maintains her nobility and her state of princess. And when it has filled her with all goods, so much that she has no more room from where to place other goods, she rises again to heaven, into the heights of the spheres, and as triumpher she is pointed out to all the celestial court. This is what my divine will wants to do and knows how to do for the creature. But to our sorrow, we see that as she descends into the exile, she does not think about her royal place anymore, nor about the nobility of her origin, and she would want to slip away from our will, which more than a tender mother carries her in her arms. And making use of the doors of the senses that we have given her, she descends into the baseness of her human will. These doors we had given her to rise again to us, so that she could make her little escapes from the exile into the bosom of her Creator. Instead, she makes use of them to make her little escapes into miseries, into weaknesses, into passions, such that descending from her nobility, she recognizes that she is no longer the princess of heaven, but the servant of the earth. Yet despite this, we do not close our doors that are our love, our paternal goodness, our compassionate mercy, the expectations that we have. And no sooner do we see that she closes her doors in order to come into our will, than we go to meet her. We open wide our doors to her, and seeing her as an uncultivated beauty, with her princess garments torn, dirty, we do not make her one rebuke, but with all paternal compassion we tell her, "Where have you been? Poor daughter, how you have reduced yourself. Have you seen how much evil you have done by living in the baseness of your human will, not united with ours? You have walked without guide, without light, without food, without defense. Therefore do not do it any more, so that amending yourself you redo the good lost." We know that without our divine will the creature cannot do any good. It is as if she would want to see without eye, walk without feet, live without food. Therefore be attentive and never leave my divine volition if you want to find the strength, the light, the support, and your Jesus himself at your disposal. End of April 29th. Fiat.